Afternoon. Welcome to another exciting edition of Reading with Mr. Eble. Still reading Grenade. And here we go. We're going to get all started. So we're going to be reading another 2 chapters. So Hideki is the first chapter, and it's called Sutishi. Otto, Hideki cried. As Hideki's eyes adjusted to the darkness inside his family tomb, he saw his father lying propped up against the stone caskets in the corner. Along the back wall of the tomb ran the shelves of urns that held the bones of his ancestors from generations past, including Shigetomo's. A wide streak of blood trailed from the entrance of the tomb to Hideki's father. Hideki's heart lurched. Otto, you're hurt. Hideki dropped the bag of the Emperor's photos by the door and ran to his father. Otto's breathing was ragged, and he slumped unnaturally to the side, one arm laid across his uniform jacket. Hideki lifted his father's hand away and saw a jagged wound in his stomach. His father had taken shrapnel from a grenade. A little run-in with the Americans, Otto said. We have to get you to a doctor, Hideki cried. It's all right, Hideki. Someone is on the way, his father promised him. But I could use some water. Hideki grabbed an empty pot and ran through the rain to a nearby spring like it was the most important thing in the world. When he returned, he had to tip the pot to Otto's mouth for him. His father wasn't strong enough to hold it himself. You need the doctor, Hideki told his father. I should go and find him. Otto grabbed Hideki's arm with more strength than Hideki thought he had. No, don't go. I want you to clean the tomb while we wait. Clean the tomb? Hideki said. That doesn't matter right now. It always matters, Otto told him. He closed his eyes. And make an offering. It's been too long. Hideki didn't want to leave his father's side, but he did as he was told. The haka was dusty and full of cobwebs. In the past, they would never have let the family tomb become so untidy. But like their annual family picnic, the cleaning of the tomb had been set aside in their preparations for war. Failing to look after a haka brought sickness and death to a family, so cleaning it was doing something to help his father. At least, that's what Hideki told himself. He found a broom and hastily swept the floor and shelves. When he was finished, he took half the rice from the sock in Principal Kojima's bag and put it into a small stone bowl as an offering to Shigetomo and the rest of his ancestors. It wasn't as much as Hideki and his father usually left, but his ancestors had gone too long without any kind of offering, and was as much as Hideki could spare. What's in the sack? His father asked. Pictures of His Majesty the Emperor, Hideki said. I'm keeping them safe. His father closed his eyes again and shook his head. No, Hideki, forget about those things. You need to find your sister instead. She's all we have left. What do you mean? Hideki, your mother and brother. They're dead. Hideki's head spun. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. But no, they were evacuated to mainland Japan. They're safe. His father shook his head. Their ship was torpedoed by an American submarine, Otto said. No one on board survived. Hideki sat down on the cold floor of the family tomb. Shock washed over him like a wave. It couldn't be true. No, I would have heard, Hideki said. At school, they would have told us. The Japanese army forbade anyone to talk about it. It was bad for morale, but it's true, Hideki. I was at headquarters when the news came in. The ship was sunk the day after it left Naha Harbor. They stopped the evacuations after that. Hideki reeled. He had almost been aboard that ship. If he hadn't decided to stay and fight, he'd be dead now, too. His eyes fell on a cobweb he'd missed in his haste, and he felt sick to his stomach. Hideki had always resented having to clean the family tomb, but now he saw what disaster neglecting it could bring. I should have never sent them away, Otto said. I should have never let the IJA have you and your sister. You're both going to die with the Japanese. Hideki saw again in his mind's eye the awful carnage of the Blood and Iron Student Corps failed attack on the Americans. It was hard not to agree with his father. But he and his classmates were just students, boys. Surely the Imperial Japanese Army would fare better than the Blood and Iron Student Corps had against the invaders. No, Hideki said, we have to win. Otto shook his head. Hideki, the Japanese were never going to win this fight. They knew that from the start. The generals withdrew the very best soldiers from Okinawa long ago and sent them to Taiwan. They didn't want them to die here with the rest of us. We're just here to slow the Americans down while the army sets up their real defenses on the mainland. We're a Suta-Ishu in Go, a sacrificial pawn. Go is an ancient game from China with black and white stones where the object was to capture as much territory as possible. Sometimes you had to play a stone you knew was going to get taken, but you did it to make your opponent play a stone that would hurt them later. But the Okinawans weren't stones to be won or lost. They were real people. Hideki couldn't believe the Emperor would just throw their lives away like that. But the Yamato, Hideki argued. They wouldn't send the biggest battleship in the Japanese fleet if they thought. The Yamato was sunk by American planes 3 weeks before it was supposed to get here, his father said. No one is coming to save us, Hideki. That's why you have to save yourself and your sister. Hideki's father coughed up blood. Where was that doctor? No one is coming to save us, Hideki. That's what his father had said. What if Otto had been lying about a doctor coming to help him? Otto, Hideki began. Suddenly he heard someone coming through the entrance of the tomb. The doctor at last. But as the shadow emerged from the doorway, Hideki saw it wasn't a doctor after all. It was a soldier. The next chapter. Ray, called Crying in the Rain. Grenade, grenade, get down, Big John yelled. Ray dropped flat to the ground. Sergeant Meredith took 2 running steps from everybody else, unhooked his grenade pouch, and chucked it away as hard as he could. Ray had just enough time to scream, Sergeant, before the pouch exploded and the sergeant was thrown back against the outside of the tomb like a rag doll. Mud and bits of shrapnel peppered Ray's helmet, but he wasn't hurt. Big John looked up from the muck. What the hell just happened? Sergeant Meredith, Ray cried. He was up and on his feet and slipping toward the sergeant before anyone else. It was one of his grenades, Ray told the others. In his pouch. One of the pins must have got caught on something and worked its way out. Sergeant Meredith had tried to twist away from the blast, but one whole side of him was torn up. He was still alive, though. Somebody get on the radio and call for a medic, the old man said. No time, Big John said. He pushed his heavy rifle into Ray's hands, and with one great heave, Big John picked up Sergeant Meredith and threw him onto his shoulder. It's not going to die here, not like this, Big John told them, and he took off for a camp at a run. Ray and the others ran with him. Sergeant Meredith hung over Big John's shoulder, his unconscious face turned to the side, facing Ray. Sergeant Meredith was the one who'd taught him how to survive. Sergeant Meredith was the one who'd given him his nickname. Sergeant Meredith was the one who had listened when Ray had argued for the Okinawans. Sergeant Meredith was the one who had taught Ray how to grieve for the death of a soldier. Ray just hoped he wasn't going to have to grieve for Sergeant Meredith. Back at camp, the medics whisked Sergeant Meredith away. Ray and his squad waited on pins and needles for word on the sergeant's condition. News of a death finally came that day, but it wasn't Sergeant Meredith. It was Franklin D. Roosevelt. The President of the United States had died of a stroke. Ray sat down on his helmet, stunned. Roosevelt had been President of the United States since Ray was 6 years old. FDR had led America into war after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941. Less than a year ago, he'd been re-elected to a 4th term, which had never happened before with any U.S. president. Roosevelt was well liked and respected among the Marines. A lot of them around the camp were shaken up by the news, and Ray saw 1 or 2 of them crying. Ray felt more shocked than anything. It's Jap propaganda, Gonzalez said. It has to be. No, it came in over the radio from the ships offshore, Captain told them. It's real. Who's in charge now? Vice President Truman? Gonzalez asked. What do you think he'll be like? Doesn't matter, Big John said sourly. Losing the sergeant means more than losing some politician off in Washington. President dying don't change a dang thing for any of us on Okinawa. We don't know the sergeant's dead yet, Ray argued. No, but you saw him. Even if he lives, he's not coming back. After all those battles he lived through, to go out like that. Big John shook his head. Still doesn't mean we can't be sad about the president, the old man said. Big John just shrugged. Grenade! Someone yelled, and suddenly a live grenade plopped into the muck at their feet. What? How? Ray thought. But before he or anyone else could leap away or drop flat, the grenade went off with an ear-splitting bang. Ray jumped out of his skin, and some of the other guys screamed, but the grenade hadn't exploded. The top had blown off it, but its iron pineapple shell was still intact. Ray staggered back. He didn't understand what was going on. One of the recent replacement troops, Private Wilbert Zimmer, guffawed nearby. I thought I shook all the powder out, but I guess there was little left in there after all, he crowed. But he was the only one laughing. The grenade had just been a prank? Ray felt like he'd almost had a heart attack. Put a hand on a tree to steady himself. Big John bellowed with rage and charged Zimmer, tackling him hard. Big John battered the private with his big, powerful fists until Ray and the old man and 3 others could finally pull him off. Private Zimmer's face was purple, and his eyes were swelling shut. I was only joking, he blubbered. Nobody got hurt. Sergeant Meredith was nearly killed by a grenade today, you idiot, Gonzalez told him. I didn't know, Zimmer said. I didn't know. Ray woke to relieve Big John on second watch late that night. The rain was still pouring down like heaven was crying for President Roosevelt, for everyone they'd lost so far in the war. Word came down while you were sleeping, Big John whispered to Ray. The sergeant made it. He's got his golden ticket. What we all wanted, medical evacuation to a hospital in Hawaii. Ray wasn't sure he wanted to get hit by a grenade like Sergeant Meredith, even if it did mean a ticket to Hawaii. But hearing the sergeant was going to live took a huge weight off Ray. His fitful sleep in the foxhole had been full of nightmares about exploding grenades. Even though Sergeant Meredith wouldn't be coming back, Ray felt like the sergeant was still with him, in a way. Not his ghost, he wasn't dead, but his spirit maybe. Like a part of the sergeant would always stay with him. Who's our sergeant now going to be? Ray whispered. You're looking at him, Big John whispered back. Big John had been given a field promotion from corporal to sergeant. He was their squad leader now. Big John settled back into the foxhole and closed his eyes. Sergeant Meredith got out just in time. We've been ordered to the front first thing in the morning. He opened his eyes to look at Ray. Everything we've been through ain't nothing compared to what comes next. So we'll stop there. We'll post these up on our YouTube channel, so if you missed any, you can check up on there. Students, keep working hard, keep doing the best that you can, and we'll keep on reading tomorrow at noon. So y'all have a great day. Take care of each other, and most importantly, stay safe. And remember, range is the way.